Hello, welcome to my channel and welcome to my entry for the Great Guitar Build-Off Kit Competition of 2022. So during the design phase here, I based it off of a Telecaster, but gave it a little more of an offset and a little more access to the upper frets. I had trouble designing this neck heel and getting it to look right. Eventually I figured out I can just use the curve from the horn and actually get a neck heel that looked pretty good. And here we have the final design of the guitar that I'm going to build. So the next step was to cut out the drawing that I had made and then spray glue it onto some MDF to create a template. This is the template I'll be using for routing, basically as a router guide. I did a rough cut on a jigsaw and then did a more accurate cut using my bandsaw, and then used the spindle sander to clean up all the edges and make sure everything was nice and clean. And then of course I lay everything out again because I like to. So then I traced the body onto the body blank and rough cut it on the bandsaw. Now that everything's rough cut, I went ahead and taped the template back onto the blank and started routing everything. As you'll see here, I of course made a huge mistake and got a little bit of tear out. You'll see it right there. So then I switched to a longer router bit to get a deeper cut, and wouldn't you know it, I did it again. This time worse, as you see right there. I managed to find some of the pieces and glued them back in, and then that combined with some wood filler and epoxy got them filled up, and then I did a carve on the body. Now that everything's carved, you can see I made a bar to hold this for doing the finish, and then basically glued the fabric to the top after finding exactly which section I wanted to use, and then I did the exact same thing for the back and cut off a bunch of the excess to make it easier to work with. So once everything was cut out, I put it onto this makeshift paint stand that I made out of an old satellite dish mount and sprayed about 1,000 coats of water-based polyacrylic. I will never use that again. It was not great for this and not great for a final finish either. So between these last two sections, you can see this is when I broke my arm. And because of the way I did this, I ended up with a lot of little issues on the edges. So here I'm just filling them with epoxy because I'm going to be doing a black burst around the edges, and that should get hidden anyway. It's just to make it smooth. And so now I've done some more work to start routing for the Floyd Rose tremolo. Some of this I can't find the footage for, so just imagine that I did all this on camera, even though I didn't. Same with the neck pocket. I don't know what happened there, but you can see that I did it. And there's a whole lot of partial assembly, check, making sure everything fits just right as this is all getting put together. So of course, being an electric guitar, you have to route for pickup cavities. I was going to do this on the main template, but then I still wasn't exactly decided what the pickup configuration was going to be. So I decided just to individually route these and just make sure I got the center lines correct when I was doing the actual routing on the body itself. So off camera, I made a template of the max size that the control cavity could be, and that's what that piece of MDF there is. That's how big the control cavity can be from the backside. And now I'm trying all kinds of configurations to figure out where all of this stuff is actually going to fit, because there are a lot of pieces uh, involved with the circuitry that I'm using. So I'm using the Sustainiac as well as a kill live circuit. Basically, the kill live allows you to have a kill switch, but then it also allows you to push a latching switch, which will cut off all sound. But then when you hit the kill switch, it'll actually make the sound turn on. So that's why it's a kill and a live switch. And what I'm doing here is basically just figuring out exactly where I want everything and marking it all out on this painter's tape on the top of the guitar. So then I can take this piece of tape and transfer it onto a piece of MDF and have another template that I then mark and then drill, so that here I can make punch marks into the control cavity and determine where I need to drill for each one of the different controls. So as you can see, it's actually a pretty big cavity, and here I'm just doing what you do and cleaning up after using the Forstner bits to get a majority of the material out of the control cavity. And here I'm marking all the holes and then putting a backer board on there so I minimize the tear out, and then I'm drilling all of the holes for all of the different controls that are required. Now that the control cavity is cut, I'm drilling all of the other holes that are required for passing all of the cables to. And then all of the areas that don't need shielding, I'm just giving a coat of black acrylic paint. I chose this paint just because it's really easy to use. I had it on hand. It dries really fast and it dries very flat. So this made it pretty easy to get the colors I was looking for. Now I'm spraying the clear coats. I started with a water-based polyacrylic, and I really didn't like the way it turned out, so I ended up just using some rattle cans of a different. So with this build, there's a whole lot of soldering. There's a 8-pin connection and a 6-pin connection to the Sustainiac circuit. Not all of those wires are actually used, but they still have to be either tucked away or they are actually used and have to be sorted out and soldered correctly. What I like to do when I have these more complicated um, soldering jobs is I like to look at each section kind of like a block diagram and look at what's the input and what's the output and figure out which section I need to do first, and then how do each circuit interact with each other. So I started with getting the Sustainiac all wired up as is supposed to be, because the kill switch circuit basically sits right in between the output jack and the output of the pickups. And in this case, the output of the pickups is from the Sustainiac circuit. So I have to make sure I get everything from the Sustainiac all wired up correctly, and then I can wire up the kill switch electronics to go between the Sustainiac and the output of the guitar. So I finished up the Sustainiac, and now I'm doing the kill live switch circuit. There's a few connections that go between the two switches, and then the output from there goes to the output jack. I have this circuit diagram that I'm working from, but I had to go a little bit different because I'm actually just using a latching push-push button instead of a push-pull pot, like the wiring diagram showed. And one last thing before I forget is to make sure I wire up the ground wire to the trim claw. And then after this, it's time for assembly. And at this point, assembly is pretty much straightforward. Reassemble everything on the neck as well. These are all just the stock parts that came with the Charvel neck, so nothing too special here. And then bolt the neck on, and we have a guitar at this point.